Welcome, everyone. I've got to get this recording thing. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the Washington Studio School this evening. And we know that many of you are joining us from places far away from DC, like Shani, and including Jordan. And we think we would all agree that connecting us all to each other through Zoom has been one of the most positive things that has come out of these very difficult past 2 years of pandemic life. I'm Jill Phillips, and for those of you not familiar with the Washington Studio School, we are a 37-year-old nonprofit art school teaching primarily drawing and painting and sculpture. We have 2 certificate programs, a foundation program and a master program, although one doesn't have to be in those programs to take classes at the school. We have an exhibition space at the school with rotating shows. And in addition to our incredible regular faculty, we bring visiting artists to the school for workshops and for free events like tonight's talk by Jordan. These artists and events broaden and strengthen the fabric of our offerings through the diversity of their ideas and backgrounds. And these free to the public events in particular are made possible by the very generous support that we get from the DC Commission of the Arts and Humanities, from the Joan Burgess Shorey Legacy Fund, and from lots and lots of individual donors. And we want to say tonight, as we always do, how grateful we are to all of them for their support. We are so happy to be welcoming Jordan Wolfson to talk with us tonight. He's joining us from Longmont, Colorado, which is outside of Boulder. And many of you know him as a wonderful painter and teacher. And maybe some of you have watched Jordan paint, which is a trip in itself, to get to watch that. Jordan was born and raised in Los Angeles and graduated with an MFA from Yale School of Art in 1991. Exhibiting both nationally and internationally, Jordan's work is represented in permanent collections worldwide, including the Albright Knox Art Gallery, the James T. Dyke Collection, and the Ballinglen Museum of Contemporary Art. Jordan has received numerous awards, including the Paula Krasner Foundation Grant, the Ingram Merrill Foundation Grant, and a Purchase Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. He was a fellow at the Fine Arts Works Center in Provincetown, Massachusetts, and at the Ballinglen Art Foundation in Ireland. Jordan founded the Painting Project in 2010 and teaches painting through studio courses located in his North Boulder studio, as well as online. His teaching encompasses not only hands-on skill development and mastery, but also relates to the inner life and the awareness of the artist. In his recurring explorations of form, space, and light, Wolfson has been investigating the relationships between perception, mark, and consciousness. And I highly recommend this book that he wrote on painting, Painting and Consciousness, which I've read several times. It's a small book in size, but huge in ideas. He asks himself about painting, what is this for? What is this truly for? What is the fundamental truth of this activity, painting, and how does it serve, not only in my personal life, but in our larger culture and time, and what it means to be human. 2 nights ago, in a class on politics and imagery at the Washington Studio School, the quote, "Change the world or go home" came up. Of course, we're in Washington, DC, and each of us here is confronted with politics and its repercussions at every turn. We are in difficult and very precarious times right now, as we all know, and changing the world is a must. Through his writings, his philosophy, and his practice, Jordan sees painting as a means to changing the world. Consciousness, presence, and the recontextualization of painting is the topic of this talk. And having engaged in conversations with Jordan about this topic, I am pleased to be able to turn things over to Jordan so that he can share it with all of you. He'll talk for about an hour, and then we'll open things up to some questions at the end, which I'm sure you're going to have, and you can put into the chat. Just a reminder before I turn things over, we always have to remind everybody to just please stay muted during the talk. And that said, enjoy, and we will see you all at the end for questions. Okay, here you go, Jordan. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jill. I very much appreciate being here, and thank you to the Washington Studio School for the invitation, and for all of you for taking the time and tuning in, and for giving me the opportunity to share with you some of these thoughts. I'm not skilled as a TED Talk kind of thing, so I've got notes that I'm going to be looking at, and I hope that that's okay with all of you. I hope I won't be too rigid as I look at what I've prepared to share with you. And if anyone is interested, afterwards, in the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to offer an edited PDF text of the talk. If anyone's interested, please contact me through my website, jordanwolfson.com, or you can put your email in the chat of this Zoom call, or contact the Washington Studio School, and I'll be able to send you a PDF of the text of the talk. Yeah, so that was great, Jill. I mean, yes, we are certainly living in particular times. And today I'd like to talk about presence in painting, how presence imbues painting with power. And in order to explain that, I need to take a step back and try to describe our current context, some of the difficulties we face as painters, and a bit of how we got here. One of the challenges as a painter that I've experienced over the years and continue to experience is the question of meaning in my work. You know, the world is burning, and we're living through pretty demanding times. So what does painting matter? And in my little corner of the world, my particular work, seriously, what does it matter? What's the point? Beyond, well, I enjoy it, which is a good thing. But after all, the world is burning. So maybe I should try to lean in and do what I can to help out. And that's where this talk comes in. Because I believe that painting does just that, leans in and actually makes a difference, and has the very real potential to participate in healing our world. In addition to that, in order for me to make the painting strong, in order for the painting to really land and be powerful, I need to believe that that painting makes a difference. Not only that I enjoy the activity of painting, but that it actually matters in the larger sense. If I don't deeply know and believe that, then how do I take the necessary risks and make the necessary effort to paint a painting that carries power and deep impact? We're in a time of rampant meaninglessness, starving for meaning, and painting matters. I'd like to start by framing our situation with an aspect that I think is a bit problematic. We live in a time of art. Fine art as a larger cultural category coalesced in the 18th century with the rise of a middle class and a market economy that could support and fund the production of fine art objects and all that went with that. Art and painting have been mixed up ever since with a market economy, and questions of worth and meaning get implicated as well. For example, I know my work is worthwhile, but I'm not actually selling anything, so maybe it's just a hobby. Or I do sell a bit, but I'm not in a commercial gallery, so maybe my work isn't really that important. Or I'm in a commercial gallery, but I don't sell my work for very much, so how meaningful can it really be? The financial aspect of the equation is enmeshed with our culture's sense of art and art's meaning and worth. especially within the last half a century. And we've all got a hunch that that's at the very least a bit problematic. Money itself isn't the problem. Selling our work isn't the problem. That's all actually necessary for distribution. But the elusive foundation and context for meaning is a problem. Because in order for me to dig in deeply into my work, or let's say I'm not a maker, but I'm a collector. In order for me to see a painting on a wall that I hadn't ever seen before and want to live with it, I have to understand in a felt way that the deeper meaning of the work, its necessity and compelling urgency, have nothing to do with its financial value. And of course, we know that. And then again, we don't know that because we don't quite have an alternative context with which to value it, with which to see and feel clearly its meaning. And I'm speaking to collectors here too, because the whole collective field needs to shift. It's a system. And the whole system needs to become more sensitive together, more awake. The ones making the form, but also those that support and help fund that making. This aspect of human engagement that we have come to call art has enormous power in it. It comes from and hits way deep inside. So deep that what we usually consider inside, my felt self, and what we consider outside, that beautiful object over there, they lose their separateness and collapse into one experience. And I'll speak more about that a bit later on. This realm of human engagement and activity reminds us of why it's good to be alive and inspires us to live more fully, burn more brightly. And that brings us to presence. Presence is the actual context and meaning for painting. How powerfully a painting carries and embodies presence is what, in the end, leads to the force of the painting's impact. But before we start talking about presence, let's move into looking at some images for a while and then come back. We'll spend some time looking at some old stuff, pre-modern, and from around the world. And I want to look at that together to try to open the context of, what is it we're doing as two-dimensional image makers. And so we're going to break that open. So I'm going to do a screen share. Here. Good, great. Okay. So hopefully now my PowerPoint sometimes starts moving on its own or gets a little, so bear with me if I'm moving ahead and I come back. So we're going to start with some like the early stuff, really early stuff. This is not, come on. Can I go there? There we go. Okay. So this actually is Neanderthal. This is 65,000 years ago. So I don't know if we can officially consider it what we're doing because we're not Neanderthal, but kind of looks similar. And then we have this. This is 45,000 years ago, part of the world's oldest known representational artwork. This is in where's this? Indonesia. And the Neanderthal wall painting was Spain. This is Argentina, the Cave of the Hands. And they made the imprints over a few different waves between 7300 BCE and 700 CE. Here's another shot of that. Kind of wild. This is Lascaux in France. They identified over 900 animals. 605 have been precisely identified. This is from the Hall of the Bulls. That bull on your screen is about 17 feet long. It's about 17,000 years old. This is India, about 7,000 years ago. This is Somalia, 11,000 years ago. This is Altamira in Spain, between 15 and 35,000 years ago. This is Bulgaria, I believe, 8 to 10,000 years ago. This is Australia, only 1,500 years ago. This is the Rainbow Serpent Gallery. They believe, the Aboriginal people believe, it was visited by the rainbow serpent when she crossed the top end of Australia during the dreaming, while singing the rocks, plants, animals, and people into existence. This is ancient Egypt, the 18th dynasty, around 1400 BCE. This is a Minoan fresco. Minoan, like Greek, in the Aegean Sea, and it's 3,800 years ago. This is Etruscan, about 3,000 years ago, so somewhere in Italy, central Italy. This is also Etruscan, and they had these wall frescoes in homes. Whole lineages were apparently sites for recurrent family rituals. And the subject of paintings probably have a more religious character than might first appear. This is the Ajanta caves in India. And these were made between the 2nd century BCE and 480 CE. They're about 30 rock-cut Buddhist cave monuments. So all of these different images are illustrating Buddhist religious art. This is from the Lindisfarne Gospels, about 715, 720, in a monastery off the coast of Northumberland in Great Britain. So text illustration. This is from 353 CE in China during the Jin Dynasty, and it is the Orchid Pavilion Gathering. And it's showing the story of 42 literati that on the 3rd day of the 3rd month came together to compose poems and drink. And in the end, 26 of the participants composed 37 poems. This is from Bali. It's an illustration of the Sumana Santaka from the 13th century epic poem that is describing the story of Prince Aja and Princess Indumati. This is a tanka, a Tibetan Buddhist painting on cotton or silk, depicting a Buddhist deity or scene or mandala, and they were intended for personal meditation or instruction of monastic students, teaching tools depicting the life of the Buddha. This is from the Fayum portraits in Egypt. Let's see, when are we? During Roman rule, around the 1st century BCE. And they were used they were naturalistic painted portraits on wooden panels that were attached to mummies. And so they would go on top of where the head was when the mummies were prepared for burial. Now we have Russian icons. This is approximately 1000 CE. These icons strictly follow models and formulas from the Byzantine art. This is Shining White is the name of the piece, of the horse, by Night Shining White by Hangan in 760 CE. And Hangan was from the Tang dynasty. And let's see, with its burning eye, flaring nostrils, and dancing hoofs, the fiery tempered horse epitomizes Chinese myths about Central Asian celestial steeds that sweated blood and were actually dragons in disguise. And this started actually, you can see just the square where the horse is, and then all these colophons that got attached, and this ended up being about 20 feet long, as during a process of about 1,000 years, all these different artist scholars would comment and add their stamp, and this is long commentary on this, to this attached to the painting. Whoop. This is Li Cheng from the 5 dynasties, early Song dynasty. Whoop. Whoop, come here. There you go. This is from, where are you? Ende. Ende was the first Spanish female manuscript illuminator in the 10th century, to have her work documented through inscription. And this is from a work called the Girona Beatus. And she was probably a nun. And we see here the incarnation, or a symbolic portrait of Christ overcoming the devil in the form of a bird fighting a serpent. This is from a man named Al-Jazari Badi Az Zaman Abu Is Ibn Isma. He was a polymath, and he wrote a book called The Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. And here, I believe it is an illustration of the life of Muhammad. Oop, come here, there. This is from Herod of Landsberg, and she was a 12th century abbess in Alsace in France, and she illustrated an encyclopedia called The Garden of Delights to instruct her nuns. This is from a man named Ma Wan, Chinese painter of the Song dynasty. And he's known for his landscape scrolls, and a characteristic feature of many of his paintings is the so-called one corner composition, in which the actual subjects of the painting are pushed to a corner or a side, leaving the other part of the painting more or less empty. This is another one by him. This is Cimabue from the 13th century, Italian Byzantine medieval art. According to Vasari, he was the teacher of Giotto. May or may not be true. But now you can, this is sort of part of the Western art canon. Here's Duccio from Siena in the late 13th, early 14th century. This is Giotto. And now we're in the late 13th, early 14th century. And his masterwork is the decoration of the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua. This is from Ahmad Musa in Iran in the 14th century, the life of Muhammad. This is Zhao Mengfu from the late 13th, early 14th century, the song during the Yuan dynasty, This is also by him. This is from the Limburg brothers, Herman, Paul, and Johann. They were Dutch miniature painters. And they were active in the early 15th century in France and Burgundy. And they created what is known as the very rich hours of the Duke of Berry, which is a manuscript, a collection of prayers to be said at the canonical hours. This is Mir Ali Tabrizi, and he is attributed with the invention of the Nastaliq calligraphy style. Whoop. This is the Ghent altarpiece by Jan van Eyck in the early 15th century in the northern Netherlands Italian Renaissance. And he painted both secular and religious subject matter. This is Fra Angelica. And this is also early Renaissance Italian. This is Bellini, Venetian painter. Oh, come here. This is Titian, Bacchus and Ariadne from the Greek myths. A Roman. Oh, see, it's moving on its own. This is also Titian. This is Diana and Actaeon. And apparently Actaeon saw Diana bathing. She didn't like it, turns him into a stag. His dogs go after him. Bad news. And now something totally different. We just jumped a couple of centuries, and this is a Chardin still life, and something else is starting to happen. Here's another one. And here's one more. And now I'm going to pause and stop the screen share and speak to you directly. So I'm showing these images to try to give a clear visual sense of our actual context, us makers, like, you know, world, what have we been up to all this time making stuff? Of course, this is just a small, little glimpse. We, the ones making these images, we're a subset of humanity. We're that part of humanity who has an urge to make handmade images. and to make handmade images that somehow carry real meaning. It's important to remember that. And our context is ancient. It's important to remember that as well. What we're seeing in all of these images, up to those last ones by Chardin, are objects being made within the context of larger communal stories, religious stories, mythic stories, stories that the makers enter, believe in, are intimate with, not only with their heads, but with their hearts. The power of all these paintings doesn't come from the stories themselves. The power comes from the maker's deep engagement with the story, which translates into the maker's deep engagement with the painting. Sacred stories bring us into a felt intimacy with living, with life, with being. That's what makes the story sacred. As makers make from this place of felt intimacy, this clear sense of life and being, their work becomes imbued with presence. Presence is this clear sense of being. Presence is the clarity of awareness. Presence is invisible, but it can be catalyzed, conjured, aroused, recognized through perception, through the senses, through sight, through sound, touch, through form. Form arises out of non-form, and form can lead us back to non-form. This is the true power of the aesthetic experience of art, of painting. The recognition and entering into this placeless place of being, of awareness, through the experience of presence. There is wholeness. There is life. There is renewal. The key for us as makers is to find the terms of our own deep and personal engagement. And the key for collectors is to become sensitive to the felt energetic experience of presence, and so help bring it into the world. And I'll speak more about this in a bit. For now, we'll continue to travel with more images. We'll move into the great creative project of modernity. With modernity and the growing secular culture, the nature of the story changed. The trajectory of creative human freedom that modernity propelled moved away from the inherited traditional religious myths and stories. What became of critical importance was the artist, the painter's individual experience, their own particular story, even if that personal story encompassed the universal, as in the case of someone like Mondrian. This individualization became modernity's great strength and great burden. Okay, I'm going to go back now to, we're going to look at more images, and there'll be some quotes. I put in a quote from each painter to try to give a sense of like, where are they coming from, or what's their story in some way. Okay, so now, oh, come here. There we go. So, okay, Cézanne. So we have Cézanne, and now this is like late 19th century, maybe early 20th century, watercolor, still life. And here's another of Mount Saint Victoire. And a quote: Nature is always the same, but nothing in her that appears to us lasts. Our art must render the thrill of her permanence, along with her elements, the appearance of all her changes. It must give us the taste of her eternity. Monet. I'm grinding away, sticking to a series of different effects, but the sun sets so early at this time that I can't go on. I'm becoming so slow in working as to drive me to despair. But the more I go on, the more I see that I must work a lot to succeed in rendering what I am looking for. Instantaneity, especially the envelope, the same light spread everywhere. And more than ever, I'm disgusted by easy things that come without effort. Finally, I'm getting more and more frantic with the need to render what I feel, and I hope to go on living not too disabled, since it looks as if I'll make progress. Bert Morrison. To catch the fleeting moment, anything, however small, a smile, a flower, a fruit, is an ambition still unfulfilled. Mondrian, early Mondrian landscape. Vertical and horizontal lines are the expression of two opposing forces. They exist everywhere and dominate everything. Their reciprocal action constitutes life. I recognized that the equilibrium of any particular aspect of nature rests on the equivalence of its opposites. Soutine. Once I saw the village butcher in his youth in Russia slice the neck of a bird and drain the blood out of it. I wanted to cry out, but his joyful expression caught the sound in my throat. This cry, I always feel it there. When, as I drew a crude portrait of my professor, I tried to rid myself of this cry, but in vain. When I painted the beef carcass, it was still this cry that I wanted to liberate. I have still not succeeded. Kuning. I'm not interested in abstracting or taking things out or reducing painting to design, form, line, and color. I paint this way because I can keep putting more things in it. Drama, anger, pain, love, a figure, a horse, my ideas about space. Through your eyes, it again becomes an emotion or idea. And I think I paused there. We're gonna pause again, and I'm gonna talk to you directly. Okay, 1 second. Stop sharing. Okay, hi. So the attribute that became of overwhelming importance in the art world was the aspect of innovation. Everyone came to believe they needed to be original in an innovative way. If a work was seen as innovative, it became highly prized and valued. This fit in with modernity's secular myth of progress, that through cultural and technological innovation, society would progress into a better and better world. The attribute of innovation also fit in well with a market economy that saw growth as health and innovation as necessary for growth. New is better. What was less clearly seen was how the quality of innovation is fundamentally connected to and comes out of the quality of presence. A maker, an artist, a painter innovates when the known means of making no longer serve the needs of the situation. That is, when the engagement with presence compels an engagement with the material that is unique to this particular encounter with this moment. It is the felt necessity of the encounter with presence which compels, not the ego's desire to make something new. This is what keeps the work honest, open, real, alive, powerful. As the 20th century progressed, the search for the new, or as Robert Hughes put it, the shock of the new, became hackneyed. By the close of the 20th century, the term avant-garde was dated. Art historians and critics, such as Arthur Danto and Hans Belting, wrote of the end of art, not the end of creative making, but the end of the myth of a linear progression in art leading to some ultimate style or state. Progress as a myth had died. And now we are well along the way into the third decade of the 21st century, careening toward an uncertain future. So now what? So I'm going to continue with some more images of painters. We've got about half a dozen more. This is Morandi. Whoop, come here. I believe that nothing can be more abstract, more unreal than what we actually see. We know that all we can see of the objective world as human beings never really exists as we see and understand it. Matter exists, of course, but has no intrinsic meaning of its own, such as the meanings that we attach to it. We can know only that a cup is a cup, that a tree is a tree. Agnes Martin. Whoop, went on its own. My paintings are not about what is seen. They are about what is known forever in the mind. When I first made a grid, I happened to be thinking of the innocence of trees. And then a grid came into my mind and I thought it represented innocence. And I still do. And so I painted it and then I was satisfied. I thought, this is my vision. Well, come here, stop. Bryce Martin. Remember that an artist's life is an intense search for truth. This search takes many forms. Every one of these forms demands its own disciplines. I learned and adapted to my search. I expect nothing from you. Question the truth of anything you confront. How does it apply to yourself and the trail you are pursuing? Western artists stand as humans looking at nature. Asian artists try to be in nature. You become one with nature rather than painting a portrait of it. That's a big shift. Joan Snyder. The strokes in my paintings speak of my life and experiences. They are sometimes soft, they sometimes laugh and are often violent. They bleed and cry and struggle to tell my story with marks and colors and lines and shapes. Angelina Prerle, I believe how you say her last name. An contemporary Aboriginal painter. Whoop, it went on its own. There. Whoop, come here. There are seeds there in that painting as well, little ones, not big ones, all little ones. This painting is about my father's country and about the bush plum. The flowers are there, the little bush plum flowers. That bush plum is my father's dreaming. That bush plum comes from Ahalpera country. It has little white flowers. Then after that, there is the fruit. If it doesn't rain, the plants are dry. If it rains, there is an abundance of bush plums. The flower is small when they have just come out. Well, after that, the fruit comes. The fruits are really nice when they are ripe. Frank Auerbach. Whoop, that went on its own too. Don't do that, please. The unity of any painter's work arises from the, whoop. The unity in any painter's work arises from the fact that a person brought to a desperate situation will behave in a certain way. Real style is not having a program, it's how one behaves in a crisis. Gillian Pedersen Cragg. It's strange, but as I look back on my life, the project of, wait a minute, can't see. Move. I can't see my quote. Oh, excuse me. I need to move this if I can to try to, there we go. It is strange, but as I look back on my life, the project of fulfilling myself, becoming someone, appeared to be a process of collecting, adding friends, possessions, information, academic degrees, skills, identities. And this attitude has some validity in the practical world, but in fact, it has only made the sense of my identity more complex. The truth is that in the studio, where I am most myself, the opposite seems to be the case. Bit by bit, everything is taken away. I forget that I'm a Democrat, a student, a woman, a sister, even that I am a painter. And more of me disappears. Art makes life bearable. It isn't a luxury. We live in times of enormous stress and fragmentation. The stressors of the 20th century have morphed and greatly increased. And new ones, such as the relentless immersion in a constant infoscape, image economy, and deluge of misinformation have come to the fore. And then, of course, there's climate change. With its increasing stress on limited resources, on migration, and stability. Which brings me back to the questions I began with. What is the meaning and importance of this thing that I do? What does painting really matter? And what does presence have to do with it? Presence is not only the invisible sense of awareness. Presence is also the experience of wholeness. There is no lack in wholeness, no fragmentation. In this sense, the experience of presence soothes and heals the anxiety of fragmentation. When we as makers arrive at a sense of resolution with a painting, there's a sense of wholeness, of rest and peace. When we as collectors come upon a painting that touches our hearts, there's a sense of integration, of present moment, rest and peace. Rupert Spira, a teacher of non-duality, describes this perceptual experience as an intervention of reality into our usual daily experience of isolation and lack. Through the experience of what we might call beauty, there is a collapse of our usual sense of inner self and outer world, and we are simply just here, being and resting in being, as being. This is what the aesthetic experience offers us. As painters, a significant part of our journey is discovering our own particular terms of making, our materials, our marking, our questions that will bring as much of ourselves into our work as possible, as much life force and necessity as possible. And through this engagement, imbue the painting with power and presence. As collectors, a significant aspect of deeply participating in this larger creative system is discovering and strengthening our receptivity and noticing this in the moment wholeness, stillness, and felt integration. In this way, painting, both the activity of making a painting as well as the activity of living with painting, serves as a kind of life-affirming protection, a kind of ongoing wholeness in movement, a kind of inward stabilizing force countering the swirl of discord and dissension. Meaningful form, or in the words of Clive Bell, significant form, leading us back to essential non-form, to presence. To engage in this activity, to return to it again and again, and through our engagement, to achieve, discover, recognize wholeness. In these times we're in, is a gift to ourselves, to our community, to this larger world. And it's a necessary gift in all directions. And please don't be deceived by outer appearances, however modest they may seem. To show up and make a mark despite our doubts and uncertainties. To dig in deep and put that into form. To risk being ourselves fully in the act of making. These are, in some real measure, heroic acts and contribute to bringing more clear, whole life force into the world. For painters, creatives, collectors, for everyone, this healing presence is always available. It cannot be otherwise. My deepest hope is that this felt experience of presence continues to grow, to fill our world, and to heal our contemporary state of fragmentation that we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. You all, there's a question that we'll start with that is in the chat, but all of you feel free to continue to put further questions in the chat. But Jordan, the first question that is there from David is, have the past 4.5 years had a material impact on your own practice? And if yes, how so? Do you consider your painting political in any sense?
The last 4.5 years, 2.5 years. Oh,
Well, this says 4.5 years.
oh. Well, you know, do I consider myself political? Yes. But at a certain point, it feels that the spiritual and the political are inseparable. That what we're really talking about is those are necessary categories for our language, political and spiritual and all of that. But the deeper truth is that we're talking about human life, fullness, wholeness. So politics are involved, spirituality is involved, it's all involved. And yes, it's affected my work in the sense that I'm just digging in deeper. I mean, there were certainly times during the pandemic in the last couple of years where I felt like, it just affected my inner sensibility. I don't know if that answers your question, but anyway.
Jordan, another question from Michelle Jerome. What inspires you to make marks and paint and draw? What most inspires you?
Michelle, it's not really, at a certain, it's like, it's not so much inspiration. It's like, I just need to mark. It's like, too many days go by and I'm not marking. I feel it. It's like the way I metabolize my life. It's like, I'm going to get grumpy, where it's like, I don't get enough protein in my diet. I'm not marking. And so and then, but I also want it to feel meaningful. And so, I like working from observation. I love looking at stuff, and I love responding to what I'm seeing. And I love marking with deep engagement, and I love the material and lots of paint. So yeah, but I don't know that there's, I mean, certainly some things I like to look at more than others, or I'm like, I've been looking for a good landscape motif, and I'm still in search of it. I think I might have found something recently, which is good. But so not everything's the same. In terms of, I want to respond to that. I want to look at that. I like complexity. I like the human form. Portraiture, it's nice, but it's hard to get people. Everyone's busy. It's hard to get people to come in and sit. There. Okay, I'll stop. Next question.
Next question is, what is your daily process? Do you draw and paint daily?
I mean to. I don't. Sometimes I do. I go through spurts of doing a daily marking practice when it's like I'm drawing. I have a lot of pieces that I have to attend to in my life, and that I want to attend to in my life. And so I don't get a daily painting in the studio practice as much as I would like. But when things are in place, I've got 2 or 3 good days in the studio a week. And then I'm also teaching a couple of days a week. I've got office work. I've got my kids, shopping. But the drawing, it's good to even 5-10 minutes. It really makes a difference for me. You know, I sit on the porch, I look at the tree in the front, or I look at these dried flowers on my table in my front room. You know, I just sit down and draw. Same thing over and over again. I tried other things, my kitchen a little bit, but I go back to those things.
Yeah. So the next couple of questions are kind of related to that. Like,
Sure.
do you find yourself feeling differently or thinking differently when you are painting, depending on what you are looking at?
Well, you know, I mean, if I'm working from the landscape or I'm working from, you know, the studio interior, I'm going to be thinking, you know, I mean, just in some daily way, I'm thinking, you know, it's different to um, try to figure out how am I going to deal with, you know, that thicket of, you know, of trees, as opposed to, you know, the space in between my furniture and tones and stuff. But that's the thinking part. But there's a nonverbal engagement of seeing and marking that is about being present and marking, making a mark in relation to what I am seeing. And that's the same. That just is the same.
So, you know, the question of why you spend so much time painting the 3 chairs in your studio, which is, I mean, you're beginning to answer it, but
well, it's a mix of, I mean, I know it. It holds the space really nicely. It's familiar. I really enjoy the familiarity, and I'm able to go into the situation easily, deeply, because I know it. I mean, sometimes I think it would be nice to, and I am planning on moving the position of that director's chair, and it would be nice to have other furniture. I think it would be. I don't have lots of space, so I'm sort of here with it, and it works for me, you know. And I've known, I mean, I've been working with these, you know, these chairs they're old friends. I mean, they go back decades. So, and also in some way, it's the space in between them, and they hold it nicely. But yes, I mean, yeah.
so with, you know, with the chairs, with the space, is
Yeah.
there, I mean, you have worked with those for so many years, and there's so many, you know, paintings. I mean, I know I personally have shown them to students for years and years and years, and there's sometimes that they are very resolved in terms of being recognizable chairs, and there are times that the marks become, you know, more sort of dissolved or more, you know, whatever. I mean, is there, do you start with an intention, or is it just
Often,
Mhm.
often I have the intention, okay, I'm going to make this a more representational painting. The forms are going to be more realized, more tonal. I want to really kind of just do that kind of work. Sometimes I have a clear intention. I'm just going to mark in relation to the space that the furniture is structuring, and it's just a more kind of open-ended kind of marking.
Mhm.
Sometimes I start one way and it shifts into another way. So
Yeah.
there's like
Yeah.
the spectrum, and it kind of calls its own, it'll change. That happens. Usually I know where I want to go.
And then you tend to keep the paintings grouped, together. I mean, I've heard you talk about that also in terms
Yeah.
of, I don't know.
Yeah, they do seem to be in a group of, it's like, oh, I kind of went through that for a while, and oh, now we're doing some, yeah, they just seem to be doing that. The marking seems like, for a while now, my marking has felt more percussive as opposed to long strokey. It's just
Yeah.
like more bap, 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 bap. I don't know.
Watching you paint is very percussive.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In demos and things.
Yeah, I think it's the music.
The music.
It's not my fault. It's just the music.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm looking at the questions. I hope I haven't. Wait a minute. When I look at your chair paintings, this isn't a complete question. So let me see.
Are there any questions related to what I just said? Doesn't have to be. I'm just curious if there's anything in there.
Yeah,
I'm happy to talk about my work too. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. Well, there is. Okay, so here is a question. Can you expand a bit about the collapse? By the way, I have 2 of your books because I couldn't bear losing one. Your book should be required reading for all artists of any discipline and humans of all kinds of treasure. I agree. I definitely agree about the book.
Thank you.
But yes, the question about expanding a bit about the idea of the collapse. Yeah.
It's what we experience. It's a way of describing it. If we, when we're in a museum and we're standing in front of, right, we all have these memories of, whether it's that Rembrandt self-portrait or it's a Bonnard or that, Titian, and we're caught and we're just there. And there are, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but our mind stops. We're just in it. We're just in it. And when our mind starts again, it's like, wow, that was great. But there's a kind of, a collapse of what we usually think of as I'm over here and the painting's over there. That when we experience beauty, we stop being a separate self. We're just here, aware, definitely aware, not thinking. We're not in word land. We're just being. And Rupert Spira describes that as a collapse. I just think that's a great way to describe it. Like the collapse of the subjective objective relationship collapses. And it's like actual reality that's not being filtered or mapped or structured by our minds breaks in to our awareness. Oh, right. I forgot. I'm alive. This is good. Painting's good. I want to paint. So, yeah. So he describes it as a collapse, and he also describes that collapse comes in different avenues. Like it can come through the mind, and that's the experience of truth. And there's an understanding. It can come through love, and this, what we usually feel as separate between me and the other person, collapses, and we're just there together. So he uses, and it just seems right on my experience of painting.
Yeah, there are comments about what a great word collapse is.
Right.
From Leslie, I'm going to just read her question. I certainly understand the way in which painting brings a sense of wholeness to me personally in the act of the making. And I can also see that collectors could come to understand that they should look for this and support it and live with collected paintings and thereby bring a piece of wholeness into their lives. But is there any way to get this across to more casual observers, the folks who look at your paintings and ask, why are you doing this? Or some other kind of question? I guess I'm asking how to get this across more widely.
Well, there needs to be a sensitizing. We need to learn how to get quiet to receive anything. But here, in this sense, a painting or an aesthetic object. And so, that takes some time, and the person needs to want to get quiet to receive. So you might ask somebody, well, I'm like, for me, this brings me to a sense of wholeness. And you could say, have you experienced that in your own life through, could be, not necessarily through art. Maybe it's through nature or exercise, or, everyone, hopefully everyone's has access to it in some way. And so maybe start to try to bridge the context so they can start to understand where you're coming from inwardly. Oh yes, for me that happens when, whatever that might be. But as a culture, we are moving, in warp speed in the other direction. How to get quiet, yeah. How to receive, how to slow down, how to be present.
Yeah, receiving is such an important word.
Yeah, Berger, John Berger.
Yeah.
What essay was it? Was it The Shape of a Pocket? I don't remember. I think maybe.
Yeah, I'm just looking for that in your book right now. That the quote from, I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
I know I have it underlined. I have everything underlined. So there was a question a while back about whether you were optimistic for the future.
Well, it's a funny thing. It's like our essential nature, the truth of our being, isn't in danger. The structure of our current culture, our civilization, certainly is, and certainly is going to be going through massive change. And that massive change, it's not going to be easy in the relative realm, in the world as we know it, in our daily lives that we experience. It's going to be tough. But the truth of ourselves, our essence, the core of love. So it's here. It can't be damaged. But it's going to be a trip. and I would like to try to the best of my ability, and I'd like as many people as possible, to the best of our abilities, to do what we can to mitigate the pain that's coming, the suffering that seems really coming up. So there does seem to be, like, this is going to be difficult. It sure looks like that. But maybe that's part of what, part of our growing pains. I don't know. Like to think so. Like we'll actually be nice, actually mature as a species. That'd be good. Take responsibility.
I did find the quote on receiving from the Berger book, the quote from Shitao, receiving. Painting is the result of the receptivity of ink. The ink is open to the brush is open to the hand is open to the heart. All of this in the same way the sky engenders what the earth produces. Everything is the result of receptivity. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Yes, I highly recommend reading this book. It is only 46 pages, but I can't tell you how long it took me to read it.
Oh, you're talking about mine.
I'm talking about your book.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
well,
I thought you were bringing the Shitao quote from Berger's book,
which is in your book.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Now I understand.
Yeah. No, it's your book that was in my hand. Yeah. A very big little book.
Oh.
Yeah. Let me see if there are any more questions. There are. Well, let's see. There is a question. Let me see. They keep shifting as new ones come in. Okay, so how do you relate your lecture in regards to digital painting?
Yeah, it's a question I think about, not just digital painting, photography, film. I don't know. I mean, all that. I think there is something that people make that isn't necessarily like tactile, hands-on, that certainly carries presence. I don't understand it from the inside. Also, I'm not familiar with a lot of digital art, so I don't have a firsthand experience of like being wowed, but I certainly have experience of seeing photographs. I mean, some of those might be digital, but and the photography really just knocks me out. So, I think what I was describing truly is about the possibility of all creative form has that possibility of participating in giving access to non-form. Of course, non-form is always available. Presence it's always available, but some form, for whatever reason that I don't really understand, seems more conducive. Some pieces of music, man, they just break my heart open. You know, some people, and it's this kind of yoga, not that kind of yoga. My body, when it does this, there's an alignment. So, you know, so I think all form has that potential. And so sure, you know, but of course I'm a painter and I like the tactile thing, and so it's a different thing. But you know, the deepest truth of it is it's all available.
I don't know. I think of words, I mean, just connecting and empathy and, you know, the sort of process of engagement and what that leads to in terms of, you know, empathy, which I think is so connected to what you're talking about in terms of the potential of, I don't know, changing the world. I don't know. Yeah. Are there any, I mean, there's so many wonderful, you know, comments about the talk and so many requests for the PDF.
Great.
And let me just scroll back and make sure I didn't miss anything. You know, any last questions? Any last things, Jordan, that you would like to?
Thank you. Truly. You know, it's just great to be able to share these thoughts with all of you. And really. So thank you, Jill. Thank you, Washington Studio School. Yeah, I'd love to hear from all of you, any of you, about any of this. And happy to put together the PDF and send it out. Yeah.
Yeah, lots and lots to think about, and especially in these times. And
yeah, it does matter. It's hard to hold on to that because it all seems so massive and insane. But our ability to recognize the inherent wholeness that's here and to bring it into our painting. And then the painting embodies it. And it can remind us and remind others. So that's a real thing. And we each have that potential, truly. So it's about making that decision. I'm going to do that. I want to do that. I can do that. And that's why that's what this is, you know. And it does make a difference. It adds up.